Hey, what's going on everyone? In this review, we'll be looking at the first lead mobile fighter from the 1994 anime series G Gundam. This is the Master Grade Shining Gundam. As you can probably tell, I'm a huge fan of the Shining Gundam. My first Gunpla ever was actually the terrible no-grade version from 1994, so naturally I'm very excited to take a look at this Master Grade. We'll be reviewing this mobile fighter in 4 categories: the build, appearance, articulation, and the gimmicks. We'll be giving each a score from 1 to 5, so at the end we can tally it all up for an average score. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this 2002 Master Grade holds up. Alright, now let's get started with this build. With this mobile fighter being released shortly after the Master Grade God Gundam, it naturally reuses the latter's inner frame. Outside of the ankles, this frame is pretty much an exact copy of the God Gundam's. Being almost 20 years old, it lacks a lot of the details we're used to today. But for its time, this frame was extremely innovative. It provided much improved articulation and stability over previous Master Grades. It also allowed for more organic part separation. The only real issue with this frame is its heavy reliance on screws. Almost every joint has at least one screw keeping it together, and more often than not, you'll have at least one of them that doesn't go according to plan. Of course, it's thanks to these screws that G Gundam kits are among the most stable Master Grades out there, making them perfect for constant reposing. All in all, this frame isn't about the details. It's more about adding stability, and it just nails that approach. Moving on to this armor though, we start to run into some issues. While the part separation is pretty well thought out on this kit, the nubs aren't quite as optimized as they could be. There are some bad ones on the blue forearm gauntlets, both sides of the red shoulder piece, and the front of this knee. There's also a pretty bad seam line on the front of this foot. Still, there are quite a few positives to this armor, like the use of rubber for the hands, feet, and V-fin. The V-fin specifically being made of rubber is a really nice touch, considering you know it's the first thing to snap in some crazy pose. I also really like that these yellow barrels on the chest were separate pieces, as they look like they'd be real annoying to paint up. Same goes for this gray vent insert on the shoulders. This green jewel on the chest also looks really nice. It may be a sticker, but it has this weird gel type texture to it, and actually pops out slightly. Really, there's nothing that bad here from a snap build perspective. This painting, however, is what's going to make or break this kit for you. Let's just run through some of this. The first up is the most important, all of this shining gold. Yeah, all of it actually comes in a pretty Happy Meal looking yellow, the same color as this V-fin pictured over here. I'd show you this yellow on the actual kit, but it just looked so bad I had to paint it right out of the box. So sorry about that one. Thankfully, all this gold is separate, so it was a real quick afternoon paint job. I was also a little conflicted on what color to paint the V-fin, as there's a case for it being both yellow and gold. Thankfully, Bandai gives you a second V-fin made out of solid plastic, just perfect for painting. You can then leave the rubber one yellow, just in case. Back to the general painting, these thrusters in the backpack require a color overhaul. They're actually one big yellow piece. It's really annoying to get that hard edge between the black and the white, but it's totally worth it if you have the patience. You also need to add yellow to these circles on the core lander. They're usually hidden when connected to the chest though, so I just panel lined them with some yellow and moved on. Next we have the head Vulcans, which come molded into the off-white of the head. They're fairly difficult to paint up, given how recessed they are, but it's doable. Alright, now it's time to take a look at all this black lining. There's a lot of it here, so let's just run through this quickly. Starting with the feet, there are these vents on the side of the toe. Then you have this prominent stripe on top. You do get a sticker for it, but hard edges around the channel make it really easy to paint. Moving on up, we have this black vent on the knee and a deep channel on the front and back of the thigh. These skirts need a lot of work. There's this black vent on the bottom, these dashes on top, and this big stripe in the middle. You get another decal for this stripe, but again, real hard edges make this a real quick touch-up with a Gundam marker. These vents just above come in gray inner frame. I could see painting them black though. You also have this line in this middle piece. Onto the chest, we have this really thick line running up the middle that looks great with some added paint. Working our way down the forearm, we have this nice vent on the side and more deep channels just screaming for paint on the front and back. Finally, we have this black line running down the arms of the core lander. Again, real easy given the deep channel. Alright, that should about do it for the standard painting. This build is naturally very similar to the God Gundam. However, the detailing of the God Gundam lacked a lot of hard edges, meaning you are essentially freehanded most of the time. This Shining Gundam though makes some noticeable improvements by including tons of deep channels to help you out. For that, let's bump up this Mobile Fighter's build to a slightly above average 3.5 out of 5. It requires quite a bit of work on your part, but nothing really that difficult to pull off. Okay, now that we've got him built, let's see what this kit looks like. These proportions are probably my favorite aspect of this kit's look. Being an early 2000s kit, he has quite a bit of bulk to him, leading to a very anime-style design. Really, putting them next to his anime appearance, you can see just how closely this kit lines up to how he looks on screen. I just love how filled out these legs are, and how perfectly in proportion they are to this bulky chest and massive shoulder armor. There wasn't much of an attempt to streamline here, and it just looks fantastic. These colors though aren't quite as impressive. This off-white specifically, or I guess I should say light gray at this point, just doesn't work for me. Aside from looking a little cheap, it really doesn't blend well with this super bright yellow in the chest or the more standard red. I know there are takes on this suit in gray, but this just seems to be a little bit too much. Also, don't forget you need to paint all this gold. Otherwise, there's even more super bright yellow to conflict with this gray. I'm also not the biggest fan of how dark this blue is. Thankfully, the part separation is again really solid on this kit, so it wouldn't be too difficult to do a full paint job here and really amp up these colors. Back to a lighter note though, these panel lines are absolutely flawless. There's really no needless lines muddying up this design. Like the proportions, they're exactly what anime fans like me are looking for. Of course, you could always draw your own lines if that's what you wanted. There's ample space to put whatever designs you want here. Lastly, we have these decals. Instead of the usual caution signs, you get a single sheet of peel and stick model numbers, names, and logos. These G Gundam suits lean pretty hard into super robot territory, so caution signs would seem kind of out of place in my opinion. These logos and names though are a great way to add character to your build, but still keep within the pseudo super robot aesthetic of G Gundam. This appearance is a fairly mixed bag for me. While the proportions and panel lines are just perfect, these colors are a real letdown. But as I've been saying, of all the problems for a kit to have, the colors are usually the easiest to fix. While that should entitle this kit to an above average score of 4 out of 5, I just have to nudge it up a little bit for these decals. So let's give this appearance a 4.5 out of 5. Seriously, this kit is one easy paint job away from being perfect. Alright, time to finally see what this mobile fighter can do. Starting with the feet, thanks to his super mode transformation, you get 2 downward bends from the toe. This combined with the hinge in the heel leads to some solid footing. Also, this kit features a rubber underside on his feet, giving him quite a bit of grip. Honestly, I've had this guy in some crazy poses, and thanks to this extra grip, he can usually find his balance. The ankles are a ball joint connected to an amazing forward and backwards hinge. This hinge is the main alteration between this and the God Gundam's inner frame. You get a solid 135-degree bend from this knee. There's also some simple pistons in here too. Nothing stand out by today's standards, but still really cool to see on an early 2000s kit. The hips are the standard ball and socket type, so great kicks, but only passable splits and spins. The front skirts are on a great little ball joint. The side skirts are a bit more limited though. Also, this back skirt can move forwards and backwards, which is always nice to see. There's a very mobile ball joint at the bottom of this chest that gives you more tilts and spins than you'd expect. Like the God Gundam, you can push this chest section inwards. However, because this chest isn't as prominent as the God Gundams, I don't find myself using this too often. You get an amazing pop out from these shoulders. This is really stand out, especially considering many kits from this time period just use a polycap on a peg. In addition, you get the usual 360-degree spin and some decent lateral movement. Working our way down the arm, you get a very limited spin from the upper arm and about a 135-degree bend from this elbow. Because of these screws in the inner frame, my elbow joint is extremely tight though. Of course, one of the major benefits of screws is that you can always go in to loosen up or tighten as you see fit. Continuing down the arm, I really like how this blue gauntlet can spin on its own. This is so great for getting it out of the way of some of these poses. These pop-in hands are made of a firm rubber making them easy to swap in and out of. I'm especially a big fan of his iconic shining fingers. They come in a great translucent green plastic, and they really pop when you use them. Finally, you have a solid forwards and backwards hinge in this neck and a ball joint for the head. This mobile fighter really lives up to expectations in terms of his articulation. While I'm sure many newer Gunpla fans might find this mobility a little average, for its time, this is some really solid stuff. Also, the use of screws lets you essentially customize these joints however you see fit. So let's give this articulation a solid score of 4 out of 5. Unless you're going for the most dramatic pose you can think of, I doubt you'll be too annoyed with this articulation. Lastly, let's take a look over this kit's gimmicks. First up is the token beam sabers. What's interesting about these sabers is that both handles and blades are different sizes. Yeah, one blade is smaller than the other. It kind of helps give his beam saber poses some forced perspective, if that makes any sense. He can also hold both beam sabers no problem, thanks to 2 dedicated hands. Next, his backpack is removable, so you can display this Corelander on its own. It requires a bit of painting though, so honestly, I don't see much of a reason to ever take it out from the suit. Lastly, we have his all-important transformation into his super mode. I just love this transformation. It's really easy to pull off and can be done in less than a minute. You just slide out these feet, pop open the legs and shoulder armor, pull out these blue gauntlets, and finally swap out this face mask. Yeah, this mask is the only part swapping you need to do. I'm actually pretty thankful Bandai didn't try for some tiny sliding mechanism in this face. You just know a hinge that small would be more trouble than it's worth. I mean, I guess it worked out in the F91 version 2.0, but then again, this kit came out over 15 years before that, so I don't think it's really fair to make that comparison. Anyway, this super mode just looks amazing. It just adds a bit more complexity to the design, and the added gold really spices up the colors. On top of that, this transformation is so simple, it doesn't hurt the articulation whatsoever. You could hit all the same poses you could before, but now he looks even cooler doing them. His feet even expand outwards, so in some poses, he actually gets better balance than he would in his standard mode. Really, this super mode transformation is essentially flawless. And that should about do it for these gimmicks. While you don't really get a whole lot, what you do get works pretty much how you'd expect. This is also one of the best transformation gimmicks I've seen in a Master Grade. While I'm sure most modern releases would include some effect parts of some kind, I don't really feel myself missing them too much here. We have to give these gimmicks a perfect 5 out of 5. The only thing I might miss is the Shining Finger sword, but considering how cheap that looks on the high grade version, I'm fine without it. Alright, now let's wrap this all up here. The build was a 3.5 out of 5. Despite the significant amount of detailing and mandatory painting, thanks to the number of hard edges and deep channels, none of it is really that difficult. The appearance received a 4.5 out of 5. These proportions and panel lines are just amazing. The colors could use some fixing though. The articulation was a 4 out of 5. This kit actually compares to modern Master Grades, which is saying something considering it's almost 20 years old. And finally, the gimmicks received a 5 out of 5. This transformation is about as perfect as it gets. Tallying all that up, dividing, and of course rounding, this Master Grade Shining Gundam receives a 4.3 out of 5. In terms of an unrounded percentage, it receives an 85%. In my review of the Master Gundam, I said it was probably the best G Gundam Master Grade, but upon revisiting this kit, I think I'm gonna have to change my stance a little bit. In terms of an out-of-the-box snap build, the Master Gundam is a step up, considering there's no real need for painting or touch-ups. However, if you're willing to put in the effort, then I'd say the Shining Gundam actually wins out. The build has some solid part separation, and unlike the God Gundam, what detailing needs to be done here is made really simple, thanks to hard edges and deep channels. Once you get all the detailing done, you end up with arguably the best looking mobile fighter in model kit form. Stack on some solid articulation and a simple transformation gimmick, and I have to say, this actually might be my favorite G Gundam model kit available. I'd recommend it to just about any G Gundam fan. Just make sure you have some gold spray paint on hand. Alright, feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, where I post updates, work in progress builds, the whole deal. You can also ask any questions you have about this kit below, and I'm more than happy to help out. Alright, thanks for watching, and see you next time.